Hello everyone and welcome to the video. We're going to be talking about this article that I wrote probably 2 years ago. It's called Moustache Man's Vaccine Mandates and the Clause Surrounding Them. It's a dive into the 1800s vaccine mandates, and it's very interesting. We're going to go over the article, but we'll actually be covering a few things extra on it while I do this, because I wrote it 2 years ago. I wanted to write so much more, but it's already a 13-minute read, and that's quite a lot, I would say. So we'll go over it together and I'll add some extra bits. I have written about my scepticism and curiosity regarding the 1800s in this previous post, and we'll talk about that another time. I'll upload it to my Substack and my website. And this post will be looking at injections which were developed in the 1800s and how they were mandated soon after they were created. It will explore how these mandates played out over the following years and decades to now. It would be Lady Mary Wortley Montagu who would bring the folk practice of inoculation against smallpox from Turkey to Britain in 1721. And I just want to stop here before we continue, because 1721 is an interesting date. The Gregorian calendar was used across most parts of the world. It went into effect 1582, and that was the Pope, which we didn't have in the UK at that time. However, this website states today Americans are used to a calendar which is year based, the Earth's rotation around the sun, so it's a globe calendar, having no relationship to the cycles of the moon, and the New Year days falling on January the 1st. However, that system was not adopted in England and its colonies until 1752. So there has been a significant time change from 1752. 1752. Just remember that. Also, it's talking about Lady Mary Wortley Montagu going over to Turkey. And Turkey, if you've been watching my videos, you'll know, is the Khazarian Empire. Well, I just want to talk about my law degree, which I'm writing up for you, and that is Somerset's case. We'll go on the Wikipedia page to talk about this, since I've got it up there. 1772 is a judgment of the English Court for King's Bench in 1772 relating to the right of an enslaved person on English soil not to be forcibly removed from the country and sent to Jamaica for sale. According to one reported version of the case, Lord Mansfield decided that, and this is really important, the state of slavery is of such a nature that it is incapable of being introduced on any reasons, moral or political, but only by positive law, we'll get back to positive law in a bit, which preserves its force long after the reasons, occasions and time itself from whence it was created is erased from memory. So it's saying here, positive law would create an idea which is completely against morals or English politics, and these laws stay in effect long after they were put in place, so that it doesn't relate to our system or our way of life anymore. It is so odious that nothing can be suffered to support it but positive law. That's again, positive law has put slavery into action, and English law absolutely opposes it because it's odious and morally corrupt. Whatever inconveniences therefore may follow from this decision, and it did open a floodgates, I cannot say this case is allowed or approved by the law of England, and therefore the black must be discharged. Basically, he's on English soil, so he's free in England. And I do agree that we shouldn't have slavery, but this case did bring about inconveniences, because in this date of so-called what we are told is 1772 was the point at which we opened our gates to different cultures. You know, once slaves arrived by boat, they could come to England and be released here. Now, positive law, let's talk about that because that's very interesting. Statute. Positive law is statute law. It's legislation. Positive law which preserves its force long after the reasons, occasions and time itself from whence it was created is erased from memory. I just think that that's really important. Looking back at history, how statute law has imposed itself, and it's come from the Roman Empire. And it came from the Roman Empire, but we got invaded in 1066 at the Pope's approval, and the Normans brought in a new monetary system, which brought in the celebrity Jews, which I call them, and they then brought in statute law. Anyway, we'll go back to this because it still remains interesting, or at least it does from my perspective. The terms vaccine and vaccination are derived from variolae vaccinae. I may have ruined that. Smallpox of the cow. Now that is Latin, which they were using in 1721. Over in Turkey. You know, if they were English, proper English, why weren't they basing its, you know, description on Old English language? Why did they return to Latin? We didn't speak Latin in England. Why did they bring it back? I just find it interesting. The phrase was first used in 1798 for the long title of his inquiry into the variolae vaccinae, known as the cowpox. And I do question what timeline we are in, especially since we have had a change in our calendar, which was done in the 1700s, and then suddenly, you know, dinosaurs appeared, there's a school system, a healthcare system, everything changed after that. The Bolsheviks are credited with Russian public health in 1918 with health protection. It included manufacturing and distribution of medical supplies and equipment, along with propaganda. It brought about medical propaganda and concentrated on maternity and infancy, the first time for maternity care to be incorporated into a public body. This idea was shipped across the world for implementation by other nations. Yeah, they sold their public healthcare system. A state medical system would be discussed in 1910 in the UK by Dr. Benjamin Moore, the author of The Dawn of the Health Age, who believed diseases should be prevented rather than cured, and this paper would see a social healthcare system set up in the UK. Homeopathic remedies and herbs were often used prior to the National Health Service, and I would call it the International Health Service. It's not a national one anymore, it's got everyone from every corner of the world in. Homeopathy concentrates on the idea of environmental impacts on health and terrain theory in medicine rather than germ theory. The NHS would not be set up until 1948 in the UK. Interestingly, it is claimed by the author linked below that Hitler was also opposed to vaccines. This turns out not to be the case, however, according to Jacobin Mag. The Prussian imperial government had mandated vaccines since 1874 for infants and men. I'm not sure if it was men or women. It says men. I'm assuming I got it right there. Vaccines became the, quote, cornerstone of public health for the following 50 years, and I quoted the cornerstone from this. This is the magazine that it came from. It's only on webarchive.org now. It was scrubbed off the internet after I wrote my piece, although, you know, I didn't get many views, but according to the article, there had been objections to such mandates for some time, and conspiracy theories surrounding this were said to be anti-Semitic. However, there is no explanation as to how, how everything is anti-Semitic, but they never explain why or how. I mean, if it's anti-Semitic, then it must be done by Jews. It must have a huge amount of interest with the Jews, and then they always say no, it's not Jewish led. So how can it be anti-Semitic then in that case if it's not led by those people? A 1930s incident blamed in the article on the administration of the vaccine rather than the vaccine itself saw over 70 children die in the Lübeck disaster under the Weimar Republic de facto government. So the writer's claim is that it was administration of the vaccine. The Wikipedia states from 1929 to 1933, 251 infants in Lübeck, northern Germany, were given 3 doses of oral BCG vaccine against tuberculosis, which was accidentally contaminated with bacteria responsible for the disease. 173 later developed signs of the illness and 72 died. Legal consequences. So it is contaminated. It's not about the injection and how it was injected. On February the 6th, George Dake, the head of a general hospital in Lübeck, was found guilty of negligent homicide and negligent bodily harm and sentenced to 2 years in prison for 72 children dying and 173 of them being harmed. Dake negligently cultivated the BCG vaccine in a laboratory unsuitable for vaccine production and refrained from animal experiments. Interesting that, isn't it? Ernst Altstadt was sentenced to 15 months in prison for negligent homicide and negligent bodily harm, as he did not test the vaccine on animal experiments and only insufficiently observed for children. Can you believe it? 2 years and 15 months for 72 children's deaths. And then you had all that stuff for the Nuremberg trial. I mean, all these people who come to light, they are coming to light for a reason of darkness. Let's just put it that way. These people who are placed in your view, they are not good people. They are, I feel that we are being sort of misled and misguided down paths of self-destruction, really. Anyway, that's the legal consequences, which is devastating. It's disgusting. And that was under the Weimar Republic, which was very much the society that we have today. This brought to mind the AstraZeneca vaccines, which were banned from many countries, and for various groups of people after a high death toll followed vaccination. The Weimar Republic was a progressive left-wing liberal society which existed between 1918 and 1933. The Nazis would take control from 1933 to 1945. Both would ensure vaccine mandates. However, Hitler provided a clause. No details are provided and none can be found on details of this clause. I have looked. Prior to 1936, German children had to prove they had received the smallpox injection to attend high school. And of course, high school would be the promise that they would get a job and a career path and a profession, right? This implies that discrimination took place prior to the discrimination that took place against the Jews within Nazi Germany. In that period, it was the Weimar Republic, so both the Nazis and the Weimar and the communists were guilty of discrimination. Clearly, children were prevented an education if unvaccinated, and it seems discrimination played an active role in this region through this era, no matter the government. Yeah. But if it happened to children, what happened to the parents? I mean, we hear about how the Jews were forced into the scrums, and that was the Holocaust. So the genocide was different to the Holocaust. You learn that in my law degree when I send it to you. The Holocaust was basically Jews being moved into the scrums, and that's where most of them died. They mostly died there because they were ill, diseased, and the air and the hygiene was really poor conditions around there. So they died of those reasons. And then there was the genocide. But I've calculated how many Jews existed in Europe at that time, and that means that Britain and Spain, Portugal, Italy, they all would have had to have sent their Jewish immigrants over to Germany in order for that 6 million to be calculated as the death toll for the genocide of the Jews. The Holocaust was different to the genocide, legally. When considering the Lübeck disaster, there must have been, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it was legally because it went into great detail about it, so I'm not sure why it would have done that if that wasn't the case. But again, it's been 10 years since I've looked at that course, so I'll be finding out and then I can correct my error if it is one. When considering the Lübeck disaster, There must have been fear and confusion surrounding health and vaccination at this time. It could be argued these tactics by the Weimar Republic have been repeated throughout the world presently. There has been similar discrimination against anyone who has not taken these special injections. Unfortunately, very little is mentioned of the Weimar Republic's discrimination against unvaccinated. However, we do know that it happened. According to this article, children and parents alike were increasingly outraged by the vaccine mandates. Hitler eventually implemented a British conscience type clause to the vaccination law. The Nazis placed mandates with mass propaganda and the education system to convince people to choose to get vaccinated. Again, these are the tactics we used in many countries today, including the UK and the US. It isn't clear how effective and easy the conscience clause for vaccine was to use either. The article states, evidence they left behind that Hitler and other Nazis understood that any policy of mandating vaccines would have worked against their genocidal aims. It provides the quote of a speech by Hitler from 1942. However, the speech states compulsory vaccination was indeed aimed at the German population, which contradicts the author's argument. In the field of public health, there is no need whatsoever to extend to the subject races the benefits of our own knowledge. This would result only in an enormous increase in local populations and I absolutely forbid the organisation of any sort of hygiene or cleanliness crusades in these territories. Compulsory vaccination will be confined to Germans alone. And that's from the speech. And if you think about what I just said about the Holocaust, you know, there will be no cleanliness crusades. And a lot of people ended up going into the slums. Well, was it the unvaccinated who ended up going in those slums? Could have been, right? The author of this article, and then also you think about those unvaccinated who went to the slums, they all died. And then you think about the vaccinated, well, they were dying. The author of this article argues that by Hitler refusing to provide vaccines to other racial groups, he was killing them, or he aimed to kill them through them getting sick. The claim is that would reduce the fertility rate, while Germans being vaccinated, therefore presumably healthy, would see an increase in their fertility rate. However, we know 70 children in one town died from vaccines or administration of them. It could be that Hitler loosened the reins on the vaccine program early in his role, perhaps having ran on it as a political issue, and then tightened them again later in 1942, although this is not clear. So you're getting a lot of people running on vaccination stuff within the system. I do believe that Hitler was part of the system. A lot of people in the alt-right praise him. I don't agree with that. What is known is that the concentration camps had been expanded in the years prior to this speech, whereby petty criminals, such as those who had stolen food or to feed their families, would be sent to them. That raises the question as to whether those who refuse vaccines remain subject to discrimination. If so, what extent? Because if they were discriminated against, then they would not have had money to buy food, and they would have been for petty criminals who went to these camps. And there are pictures of those camps out in the wilderness, basically, and it's German, apparently German soldiers, but I question whether they were German petty criminals, and they are dying in those fields. Oh, it's awful. Moreover, similarities exist whereby there is pressure via media and the UN for Western nations to provide vaccines to nations of other continents. Hitler's refusal to provide vaccines to those nations may have been in response to media demands and media playing the role of propaganda, and possibly desirability of vaccines to ensure greater uptake. The article also claims the Chief of Staff and head of the Nazi Party, Martin Borum, wrote in 1942, therefore compulsory vaccination and German health services are superfluous. The fertility of the Slavs is undesirable. The Slavs. This echoes the current mandate that to work within the NHS one must be injected. This comment was made in 1942 after vaccine mandates had been provided a clause, likely due to it being a voting political issue, so therefore had to be enforced. It is not clear why unvaccinated people would be less fertile than It's not clear why unvaccinated people would be less fertile than vaccinated people, in this case the Germans, because the Germans were overly vaccinated. Both Hitler and Borum imply vaccination would lead the Germans to higher fertility. It is not clear if these vaccines were specifically designed for high fertility. If they had been, they would surely be used today to help people with their own struggling fertility. So this is doubtful. However, was the claim of vaccination and high fertility part of a propaganda claim or campaign to drive ongoing vaccinations? And if you remember, they had these images of the, Aryan family. So the man, the woman and their 2 children. So if there was this fear that they were being over populated, then maybe they wanted to have these injections because they thought, wow, okay, we're going to get our children will have massive families, it'll be wonderful. And obviously things were going well economically for a while in Germany under Hitler before it all went collapsing. It further states, Robert Koch Institute, the country's disease prevention agency, responding to a request from a Nuremberg engine plant for vaccines for 3,000 Russians. Vaccinations were primarily intended for Germans, not Russians. The institute responded, leading the plant to withdraw its incorrectly placed order and reaffirm that vaccinating foreign workers was not an option. The Nazis understood that if you wanted to exterminate a lot of people, making sure they were vaccinated against a contagious disease was not going to be helpful. And obviously we're told that they wanted to kill the Jews, and the Jews were possibly the Russians. So why would they try and save the Jews, right? Or the Russians? It's not clear still to this day why it is one country's responsibility to look after the citizens' health care in another nation. Such a statement might make me out as a Nazi, since this author believes national governments have a duty over the healthcare of an entirely different nation. It reminds me of the German foreign minister today, who will put Germans under energy pressure in what she claims to be a stand for the Ukraine. Yeah, the obscure reasons why they inflict pain on us for the good of other nations is just mad. It is clear the Bolshevik communists and socialists brought about a vaccine industry through the implementation of public health protection and their vaccine mandates to ensure that industry was kept alive. Public health is a great narrative to extract tax from workers for elitist self-enrichment, providing a greater good reasoning behind such tax, which possibly prevented or reduced opposition. The implementation of vaccinations in Weimar Republic, at least, did see vast amounts of deaths in one recorded incident. However, many incidents such as these are not recorded, therefore a higher death toll between 1874 and 1933 is likely. Those who did not take the vaccines continued to be discriminated against. Due to Hitler writing in a clause to the vaccine mandate similar to that of the British applied, it might be that this was one of the voting issues Hitler ran on and therefore won in a democracy, right? That democratic idea. It might have been a voting issue since people then, as it's similar today, were seeing loved ones get harmed and even killed by these vaccines. As more people got harmed, the group got larger to the point it would need to be raised as a voting issue. It is likely then that those who wished not to take the vaccines were concerned about discrimination they would face and wanted reassurance they would not face it. And maybe that was a test run, right? Maybe they realised that they needed to plough us with all this science and, you know, this idea that we were evolving and advancing even greater. And maybe they realised, okay, it's going to take another 100 years to get rid of these whites. Because remember, the vaccines came from Turkey, which was the Khazarian Empire at one point. It seems that the majority of people continued following vaccine mandates which were specifically aimed at Germans. Propaganda about fertility was used in the encouragement of vaccine uptake. Clearly, there was local concern about the fertility rate at that time, or maybe there was concern about immigration. It also raises thoughts about anti-vax doctors today issuing concerns about fertility and miscarriages with these untested injections. Luckily, in the US and UK, we have a very different way of life, or legal system is what I probably meant, to the Europeans, but very similar to one another with respect to liberty. So we have the common law, which is case law, which is what I keep talking about, which is the way we really do need to fight back. Even if such an idea is in collapse of process. So yeah, in Europe they work on a civil law system only. In the Commonwealth countries we work on common law, which is case law. Yeah, you focus on the case law, although legislation or positive law, which is actually negative law, is hierarchical within your legal evidence. However, it could be that it faced such collapse during this period too. It could be that Hitler was simply a wolf in sheep's clothing, promising the German people to back down from such mandates, but doing very little in practical terms to do so. And I think that's what happened. I think we're seeing that with RFK, we see it with Nigel Farage, with Trump. There are the so-called populists, but and Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn, but they actually are part of the system. They're just there for, when there's a rising happening, they plant these populists just to calm it down a bit. They're like the volume control. With discrimination against those who refuse to take the vaccine acknowledged, it is likely that they continue to face discrimination as we see today, face job loss, loss of home, poverty and famine. Those who made illegal attempts to feed their family after such refusal and consequences likely ended up in the concentration camps. I absolutely believe they did. If this is likely to have been the case, then those who wish not to take vaccines should hope our government keep to a liberty focused mindset. Well, our government is not going to do that. Our government is not going to focus on a liberty minded mindset. So this is why we have to focus on common law, which is why I want to get this book out so that we can start looking into past cases. You can learn how to find case law and you can fight back, because the government is not there to help. But also prepare for the event that it does get much worse. And this is why I talk about guerrilla gardening. This is why I talk about looking out for what they call community orchards and different ways of feeding yourself. Find out about canning, dehydrating food, all those sorts of things, because there will possibly become a time, and especially under these left-leaning governments, when you may not be allowed to get food. Although we do I do feel so bad for Europe, because they don't have the common law system and they can't use case law, but they do have and theirs is more based on an academics system, where academics provide evidence, then they'll use that to make their cases, what my understanding is, but I don't know for sure. We use the common law system, so please learn it, take it seriously. It's going to be our saving grace, I think. Finally, it seems wars provide good statistics which may aid in the cover-up of vaccine deaths and ensuring the depopulation of citizens to a more preferred limit. Yeah, to hide the deaths, right? Therefore, I do expect the Russia-Ukraine war to progress, and obviously the Israel-Palestine one has started since, before all-out war takes place. So I think that war really is going to be used to hide the deaths. We do need to learn case law and how to use it, and then preparing, all that kind of thing. We're not going to. What I was going to say, actually, with the European system as it is under civil law, when all these scientists and academics are writing pieces, they are so important for the Europeans. So if you're a scientist and you're writing these opposing views, articles, research, studies, whatever it is, opinion pieces, that is so important to the Europeans within their legal system. So keep at what you're doing. I don't necessarily have any trust or faith in science anymore myself, but that will be something that will be a saving grace for the Europeans within their system that they use. And I think there's also, that's the system used in South America and also Africa, the civil law system, whereas we use the common law. Ireland, all the English speaking nations basically, and then Pakistan and India, some parts of Africa and everything. But anyway, that's my article. It's a 13-minute read, but I've just gone over it and I've just gone through some extra details. I've got about 10 essays which I've written under that username and on that website, which is Hive blog, and the name is Living the Truth 11. I will be putting those articles onto my Cafeed Substack so that you can read them there, and we'll go over them in videos as well. I really do think that we need to fight this through the common law, get the common law back into priority again. Right, I'll leave it there because I'm a bit tired and I'm sure you are now. Thanks for listening. Please share, please like, please subscribe and please comment. Bye.